Good afternoon, viewers. Welcome to the Chlorophyll podcast to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Chlorophyll. Today's episode is truly special. We have three esteemed guests. We have Nivedita Narayan with a master's at Cornell, senior research advisor at Transform Rural India Foundation, adjunct faculty, School of Public Policy, IIT Delhi, a very respected name in the social sector. Second, next is Suman Srivastava, alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad and faculty at the Indian School of Development Management. After a stellar career in advertising as the CEO of a global agency, he switched to working for the social sector. He is an advisor as well as an author of two books. Last is Diksha Sharma, uh, a Group Chief Sustainability Officer at the Aditya Birla Group, a very special place. He has a master's degree in engineering from IIT Mumbai and uh, was with PwC before joining the Aditya Birla Group. So these are our esteemed panel of judges. Most of you who have joined know that we had, as a way of celebrating 25 years, we had said that Chlorophyll would do branding free pro bono for any NGO. We got no less than 19 applications. Uh, Obviously, it is not a question of which is better and what is not good enough. They were all doing fabulous work, but we used the brand lens to shortlist them to three. And now, in order to avoid my bias of Chlorophyll's prejudice, we have these three very special guests who will listen to each one of those presentations for 10 minutes. They will ask questions for 5 minutes, and at the end of it, the three of them will choose the one NGO that Chlorophyll can work with. It will be our privilege to work with that NGO because, as I said, while the three have been shortlisted, all 19 who participated in this competition were doing fantastic work. So I'm going to let in Srujana Charitable Foundation first. Welcome, Prasanna and Jyotika. I
Thank you so much.
hope you're excited about talking to all these three judges. Uh,
Absolutely.
okay, your time starts now. You have 10 minutes to present. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, esteemed panel of judges and Chlorophyll, for giving us this opportunity. Prasanna and I are a bit in a very cold environment in Kalimpong, so we would be shivering and our voices would be a little shaky. But we are blessed to have this opportunity to share the story. Srujana's story starts 14 years ago when two young kids, Jyotika and Vaishali, were studying MBA in social entrepreneurship and landed an opportunity of internship with rescued victims of human trafficking. Now, these two young adults were from privileged middle class family. Never seen something like this. Yes, of course, we have seen Crime Patrol, so it was the stories were there. But here were a group of 30 young girls, aged 9 to 14-year-old, who were rescued from the Human Trafficking Act. They were sort of fortunate because they were rescued. And we, as naive and clueless young adults, were teaching them math and English. One day, a 9-year-old comes up to me and says, and I was 23 back then, comes up to me and says कि दीदी आप यहाँ पे आते हो बहुत अच्छा लगता है आप मैथ और ये सारी चीज़ें सिखाते हो हमें मैंने आपको क्या लगता है कि मेरा ये लीगल केस खत्म हो जाएगा तो मेरे साथ क्या होने वाला है मैं उधर ही जाऊंगी जहाँ से लेके आए and it broke my heart till day. If I go back to that moment, it is very clear in my mind, it breaks my heart because for me 9-year-old are supposed to be mischievous. The only tension in life they are supposed to have is exams or not doing homework and getting a scolding by their teacher or a parent. But here was a 9-year-old who not just knew that she has a legal case on her, but has no family, no education, no money to fall back on when the legal case is over. Typically these young girls who are rescued, they have legal cases which go on for minimum maximum how many ever years, but minimum stay duration in shelter homes is 21 days. So I went back to Vaishali and said that we have to do something. It was like those passionate empathetic young adults ki kuch to karenge, kya karenge, we had no idea. But she had a background in merchandising as education, I had an education in vocational education. I said kuch chota short term course sikhate hain inko and we'll have them make some products. We did a pilot project of 8 months with 30 girls, teaching them fashion jewelry, and they earned some money because we used to go and sell those in exhibition representing that group. Now after 8 months of having some success in this, winning some business competition, social business competitions in India, internationally, we said, ha, now we can do this full time. And we started researching. So there were many women's groups, self-help group, women's group, NGOs working in the same area, and we were just one of them. We added to the list. And then we said, what is the main problem? Why are there so many NGOs and still not, this issue is not being resolved? And we found one area which was the gap which we identified back then was market linkage. The women were being skilled. There were skill training IIT, ITIs, and there were vocational training institute. There were NGOs who were there, but of course, these women who were making products had difficulty in reaching the market. So we started doing that for them. Market linkage karo, उनके लिए exhibitions facilitate karo, have them put up their stalls and get them some orders. And this went on for good 6 to 7 years in the 13-year journey of Srujna. And then it hit us hard that they are not independent, they are getting dependent on us, and we are one more mediating organization. So we discovered the power of leadership at the grassroots. And then we found one lady called Kumari. And Kumari ji, we worked with her for 4 to 5 years. We set up a, in Khardanda fisher community, we set up a livelihood unit with her. We gave her coaching and training to be a leader. And then in 4 years' time, she took over the whole center. She took care of the rent. She got orders on her own. She employed 8 women in the community. She started earning a profit out of it. And the second image you see, she started a brand called Cotton Cart. Then she discovered this power that I can replicate it anywhere. And today, in east of Godavari, in her native village, she has started a similar center, empowering 30 more women. And that's what Srujna does. Prasanna, next slide, please. We have been fortunate enough to work with more than 150 super didis, we call them, which are Kumari kind of leaders, who employ more than 4,800 women in the livelihood units across India. And once they had this livelihood, earning income, they were leaders. We also taught them financial literacy. And not just them, their whole communities, their families, their extended community, relatives, friends, everyone. And that's how we were able to teach financial literacy concept to 1.16 women across India. That's what Srujana does. We have presence pan India, we are good at operations. But then, of course, in the past 2 years, we have realized that Srujana stands means different thing for different people. For donors, we are an NGO in the cause of livelihood and women empowerment. So if they have agenda of women empowerment and livelihood, they will contact us. And sometimes even skill training agendas are, we do come across them. For women, we are an organization जो सब कुछ देता है, resources देता है, market linkage लाके देता है, training देता है. For volunteers and for our team, we are a good charity, good work doing charity. And it hit us hard that we are so many things to so many people, but we are not a brand which has synonyms, like whatever cause we stand for, the values we stand for, and the impact we do. The Srujna word is not synonyms with all of that. It is different thing for different people. Which I was discussing it with few people, and they said, what comes to your mind when you think of Titan as a brand? And I said, it's an Indian brand. It stands for quality. It stands for fun. I love Titan products. And they said, yeah, but does Srujana has that kind of identity? And yes, that's the reason why we wanted to rebrand ourselves, and we have been doing that exercise for a while now. The lead management team has been able to jot down some values that we stand for, which is impact is the first thing that comes to our mind when we say Srujana. We want to have excellence in every work we do, with integrity, of course. We have seen resilience as one of our values because we went through our turmoils when funds were not there, and we see resilience in the women we work with. And last but not the least, the collaborative spirit. We strongly believe that we as an NGO need to bring together a lot of stakeholders to showcase the impact that we are trying to do to create an army of courageous, independent women change makers. And that can only happen when there are collaborative spirit. But yes, there is still a journey that Srujna has to pass when it comes to being synonyms with all of these things. And that's what brings us here today in front of these esteemed judges, the team, and the people who are watching the stream live. That we want to spread impact far and wide. We want to deepen our impact, and we want every stakeholder to be proud of Srujna and synonyms with the cause that we stand for. And that is it from my side. This is our tagline, Mauka Do Zindagi Badlo, and we truly feel that if we get this opportunity, we would be the catalyst to changing lives of many many women across India.
Very nice, Jyotika. You stuck
Thank you, thank
to
you
your
so much.
time. So we have enough time for the judges. Anybody? Nivedita, Suman, Diksha, you have any questions for Jyotika?
Yeah. Uh, yes. May I go first?
Yeah, please,
Yeah.
please.
So, hi, Jyotika. Thank you. Very inspiring
Thank you sir.
presentation. Thank you. So, two questions. One is, I mean, uh, are you still in the area of human trafficking, or are you just focused only on livelihoods and flexible work opportunities? And the other question was, what's limiting you? What do you think is the key constraint or limitation that's preventing you from scaling up?
Sure. So, to answer the first question, we still do work with rescued victims of trafficking, but we have also broadened our horizon. We work with women who are impacted by poverty in different ways, and especially our focus has now expanded to rural and tribal communities as well, and not just restricted to urban community where we started in Mumbai. We have reached a certain level of scale, I would say, having presence in Kalimpong, Srinagar, Chennai, Bangalore, and Mumbai, of course. But we want to spread our wings in these communities. And two things which come to our way. One is, I think, lack of awareness at various levels. Even the women who come to our unit are a little skeptical of ये क्यों कर रहे? What is their agenda as an NGO to do this? Definitely, I would say funding as an NGO, we always look for more funds so we are able to impact larger communities. And we have, I think, reached our level of things. So to go to the next level, we also need a new mass awareness, mass advocacy kind of campaigns to showcase Rujna's work. And at the third level, also awareness is required so that we can connect these women's group to more and more clients across India. So local handmade products can be sold across.
Okay.
Sorry, follow-up question. I mean, is your constraint the number of super DDs you can create, or is your constraint that the super DDs, the women actually coming to those centers?
If we constraint is creating number of women leaders at the grassroots, because it takes us, we have an outreach of more than 5,000 women, and we are able to create and develop only 150 super didis, because that's how difficult it is. Our research and surveys says there was lack of 83% women said there are no role models. The only role models they see is their mothers and grandmothers and everyone doing stitching or doing some food products, but doing it in their houses. No one takes charge like Kumari ji, and I will do it for the whole community and my native and in the city, everything. So yes, if given an opportunity, I would create an army and thousands of super didi, and our work is done. They can take the impact far and wide in the community.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, may
Any
I
other
have
questions?
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead. I just want one time up.
No.
Is that the bell?
No.
Okay. I have a question. The 4,800 or 5,000 women, what's the kind of median income that they would be earning?
So if there are part-time working which is 2 to 4 hours, they earn anywhere between 3 to 4,000 rupees. If they are working full-time, which is 8 hours, they earn anywhere between 7,500 to 10,000 rupees. And if they are super didis, which are the leaders, they sometimes become entrepreneurs like Kumari ji, they have 20,000 plus income as well.
Diksha, you wanted to ask something?
Yes. So, Jyotika, one is kudos. I think this is very powerful and very brave.
Thank
My
you. Thank you.
question is in some ways linked to what Suman has asked, that uh, if outreach and, like, how do you what do you have some prioritization thing that
Yes.
if this is how it's going, how do you pick on, and both in terms of the locations and in terms of what cause or what is that skill development? I'm curious to hear about how strategically you think about this.
Sure. So our growth honestly was very organic in nature and also random, ad hoc, because till the time in 2016-17, what happened? We were doing exhibitions, so we got a lot of requests from the corporate companies that we have offices across India. Can you do something? And we started reaching out to self-help groups in different communities, saying, "Hey, this space is there. It is for free. Don't waste it. Can you go and sell?" And then we developed a vetting process to see whether they are authentic, genuine, etc., etc. Then COVID hit, and many of the donors said when we were making masks that there are women's group in their community also, and even stakeholders, not just donors, who said these are community, can you help them with income generation, because they were making masks and we were distributing it, so it led to income generation. But now what we have, this location that I mentioned, we are there, we are not spreading anywhere else, but we are deepening our impact in these locations. So we already have three centers in every location. One is doing textile, one is doing food products, and there on we are searching more super DDs there. So
Build on that, you've
yeah,
now found.
yeah, yeah. Of course, Maharashtra being the base, we started in Mumbai, so we're spreading there. But we also have presence. Like right now, I'm on field work in Kalimpong, where we see massive needs with 3,500 self-help groups. We are working with only two right now. So those are the kind of impact that we are trying to do.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Yotika, very inspiring story. I think
Thank
it's
you.
time
Thank you so much.
to do your
Thank you.
scoring, and we can let the next group in. That is
Sure.
Youth
Thank
for
you.
Jobs Foundation. Thank you, Jyotika. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye. All the best. Hi, Meera.
Hi. Hi, Kiran. Hi, Chlorophyll.
Hi,
Thanks for
Jyoti.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
thanks
Good afternoon.
all having such lovely judges, and also for letting us listen to Srujan. Such inspiring work.
Absolutely,
Very great.
absolutely. That
Thanks
is
for that.
why I prefaced the introduction by saying that actually we shouldn't be calling this a competition, because everybody is doing so much meaningful work. But we are a small company, so we can work only with one. So, Meera, all yours. Meera and Jyoti, please take over. Start
Thank
your
you.
presentation. Yeah.
So while Jyoti adds the slide, let me just begin. I started Youth for Jobs 12 years back. Today, we took a space which is neglected in the country, which is youth with disabilities. Our vision is that every youth with disability will be poverty free, independent, and confident. And the pathway for it is something which I believe in, which is livelihoods, skilling them and linking them to jobs and enterprises. Um, in fact, the mantra which drives this work is that a job to one person in the family, especially if it's a disabled, takes the family out of poverty in a very sustained manner. And there are enough of third party studies on my own work, both previous and this work, which shows this. So today in this space, we are the largest in South Asia. We've touched about 15.1 million households. Our work is really in the rural areas, in the villages, because one of the biggest challenges we have is that there are several myths around disability in the villages which prevent them either being captured in the census or being come out of their home to be linked to these skilling, upgrading, whether it's education, whether it's skilling, whether it's jobs or whatever. So our biggest task is to do go through households where we have a very grassroots team and volunteers who do behavioral change campaign, telling them about the government entitlements and also the fact that if skilled right, they can give jobs. In the beginning, it was a uphill task because no one believed us. But now, as our work moves and there's a ripple effect happening, if we have 10 alumni, in one area, they act as our brand ambassadors to bring about change. So every year we train about 6,000 youth with disabilities, and we work with 18 disabilities out of the 21 which is recognized by the government. The rest we can't because they are intellectually disabled and the market does not accept them. We believe that this work cannot be done alone. So we work very closely with the government, with companies, with parents, and other stakeholders in this work. We won several awards, but that just shows us we're on the right path and we have partners across different stakeholders. Next, please, Jyoti. This is our brand one, which we are talking about. So we have various programs for this impact, and some of these programs itself are beginning to be so large. Like 2.5 years, we started the Grassroots Academy, which went closer to the poor and which was based on what the UN says, nothing for us without us. So I thought to myself, if we are going to invest and believe in the capacities of youth with disabilities, then they should be the change makers, not us, in areas which matter to the country, which is the villages of India. So we have 75 what we call Divyang Mitra, friends of the disabled, who are positioned in the various communities where they are from, and we invest in their capacities to become change leaders in the community, which means they do the jobs, they do the enterprises, they on their wheelchairs with a tab in their hand, they go and ask people with disabilities for the first time, saying, "Aapko kya madad kar sakte hain?" And this makes seamless sensitization on one hand, but the other, as an organization, is taught us to listen to them, because if we think jobs is the most important, they told us actually it's the UDID card or the digitized Aadhaar card for the disabled, which lets them get a lot of entitlements, which is the most important thing. So we changed our program focus to include the UDID card, which actually is a challenge because it's digitized, but the government says it's universal, but it's not at all universal in the rural areas. So this program is actually giving for the first time disability a voice, and telling, actually the collector told me, saying that why don't you nominate one of your fellows, for the highest government awards. Yesterday I was in Karimnagar with the collector, who's promised that in Karimnagar district we'll do universal UDID and support in every way, training space, etc. So that's an inspiring program of ours, a new one, a second new one which we've started, which is, no one looks at co-vulnerabilities. People work in gender, but no one works in women with disabilities. So we've started this program, which is also where we partner with our global partner Zero. But more importantly, work in India. The government of Karnataka has invited us to do one of the largest programs on women with disabilities with their self-help groups, and that program we're just putting on the drawing ground. So this is the work which we do, which is really vast, all under the Youth for Jobs umbrella. Next, please. The second brand we have is Swarajability, which is AI triggered accessible job platform, which Swaraj means independence, abilities, leveraging the abilities. And this is the only of its kind in Southeast Asia. So this is brand number two. Next, please. And the brand number three is Not Just Art, where I believe that honing their creative skills makes them a whole person. So we have a global ability photography challenge It's the third year, and this year the UN, India, and the UNESCO has joined hands with us. Next, please. All these three have a similar impact. What it does is it takes a youth with disability from extreme vulnerability, from being a liability, to be, in most cases, the most highest earning member of the family. And therefore, there's a whole 360-degree transformation of life which happens. So I always say this work survives because of blessings of parents. Every mother worries and wonders what will happen to her kid with disability if they remain in home, because siblings don't want to look after it. And what we do is completely change this situation. Next, please. So our big dilemma is, how do you bring these three brands under one umbrella? We have three brands, but it's very clear that we need to show the larger picture. So how do
Correct.
we do this?
Correct. Great, Meera. Fantastic. Again, another inspiring story. Judges, any questions for Meera?
So Meera,
Nivedita, Suman, Diksha.
yeah,
Yeah, Diksha.
I can go first. No, thank you, Meera and Jyoti. This is a very inspiring story, and it had been quite. I mean, maybe not even call it a story, a very inspiring initiative. Uh, my this thing is, for one, I'm quite curious to know the backstory. That how did you kind of decide on this is the one, and therefore, do you have a clear this thing on what you wanted to do versus what you set out to do? Is that roadmap very clear to you? Are you feeling that you're going in that direction? And what is, if not, what do you feel is coming in the way of getting to what you thought you were going to do?
I think we chose disability Diksha because I worked with the non-disabled for a long time. I started India's first skilling mission, then the World Bank, then the UN. So I didn't want to repeat any of my previous work. And then I
Uh-huh.
saw the ILO figures, which says 80% of the world's disabled lie in developing countries like India. So I asked myself whether I could create once more a model for the country for a very vulnerable segment which is neglected. So 12 years back, that's why we started this. Now, regarding the road or the pathway forward, when I set it up, what I thought was that I'll do best what I know, which is livelihoods. All along, I've been looking at livelihoods of the youth, which means look at communities, look at markets, and how do you bring the linkages between the two. But here too, we use the same, the principle is the same, where you look at the communities, but look at the markets as well. And that's something which we as an NGO do extremely well. I think the big difference is that over here it's far, far more complex, that at every level, if I tell you the story in 3 minutes or 10 minutes, behind there's a whole, web of complexes and challenges which we need to map and towards a bigger picture. So the bigger picture definitely is poverty free. Okay, and I think all these things which we add on add to the larger picture which we have in mind.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
I have a quick question. Thank you so much for this. Is really very important and inspiring work. I understand that some amount of capital formation, some amount of income, some amount of social protection is what, on an average, you're able to ensure. However, what happens when these people get older? Do you have any cases? Because when the family, my parents are no longer there to look after them, what's the future in terms of the social setup?
You asked a nice question, Nivedita. In fact, a lot of people who work in an area which is becoming important, which is old age, they ask us, saying you're working in disability, why don't you add old age also to yours? Okay. But I think we work with youth. So we've raised youth age. Formally, a youth is defined as 18 to about 24 to 25. But for disability, we've raised it to about 40. And we do, for example, enterprises for people up to 40. Beyond that, we really don't look, because even in this work which we do, I think the work we do is just it's a small, what I call a large pebble, in an endless pond. There's so much to do because government does very little. It's too complex, this markets and community for too many NGOs to do it. NGOs do training, but they don't understand markets. So the answer is we remain in the segment which we work.
Just wanted to add there, Nivedita, is that since our team looks at entitlements and how the government actually
Yeah.
can help,
Sorry,
that
good point.
the entitlements go all the way until whenever that person is able to access them because he is disabled. So I think that adds up to how we can support people who are beyond the employable age.
The UDID, Nivedita, that's like the Aadhaar, and that we don't restrict to youth. We, as Jyoti rightly said, we do it for all.
I see. Lovely.
Yeah.
Suman,
Thank you,
you had-
Meera. No, nothing. Just congratulations. Very inspiring. Thank you. No
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Meera Jyoti. Thank you very much. All the best. We have the last organization, Adhyayan Quality Education Foundation.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, Nita, can you hear us?
Yes, I'll be presenting. This is Anushri, and
Acha,
I have
Anushri. Okay. Anushri. Go
Um,
ahead. All yours.
Would you like me to start? Okay, great. I don't have a presentation. I'm just going to be speaking with you, so you just have my face, no slides. But thank you so much for this opportunity. And I almost feel like, I heard the other two, and I'm feeling like, oh, please go ahead and do the rebranding. Everybody needs it, and everybody's doing so much work.
Correct.
So I'll get started. I'm Anushri from Adhyayan. We are a 7-year-old organization that exists to enable a good school for every child. And we do this by strengthening last mile leaders in the public education system in India. What we really do with school heads and district heads and block heads is we build their capacity to learn how to evaluate their own schools, create a plan of action for their schools, and then begin to monitor their schools and peer communities of school heads who start visiting each other's schools and helping each other get better. Our work spans 7 locations, 4,000 schools. We impact about 3 lakh children, and our work is spread across places like Goa, Maharashtra, Karnataka, but also Tripura, Nagaland, and Arunachal. And we've made an increasing effort to go into more vulnerable geographies and work over there. So before I start talking about rebranding and why, like the story of rebranding for us, I want to go back to like the 9th of October of this year, which was the day when our entire country was mourning the death of Ratan Tata and his legacy at the age of 86. Every single social media post, every news channel, every work group was flooded with messages about how he was such a visionary, how he changed the course of our nation, what does his death mean? And the grief and respect was really palpable. But at the same time, on that day, I was really busy because I was at the funeral of my security guard of my building. His name was Venkatesh. He died on October 9th at the age of 65 from an untreated liver condition. He was a 5th grade dropout. He spent 30 years working in our building and serving many others on that street. And, every evening when we'd come home, he had his little phone and he used to play songs by MGR. And he used to say that, oh, nobody cares about people like us. But when MGR was in power, he made sure that, I was always fed, even when I didn't have money. I share this story to really talk about the story of the last mile child and the first mile child in India and how different their life trajectories are. If you look at the stats in India, the first mile child is more likely to be born in a hospital, is more likely to be a boy, is more likely to be upper caste or from a traditionally wealthy community, is more likely to be attended by a medical practitioner soon after he's born, will go to school for longer, will complete school, will grow taller, will get a more stable and better paying job, is less likely to fall sick, is more likely to seek treatment. But the last mile child story in India, they inhabit a world that is the entire opposite of the spectrum. There's a book that I really like called Whole Numbers and Half Truths by Rukmini S., where she talks about what makes households poor and rich in India. And one of the key axes she defines is education. Individuals with a higher education are more likely to obtain salaried jobs and have a higher income. And the median household income of the median income of a household with a college graduate is 4 times that of the median income of an illiterate household. So a quality education is crucial in changing the path of more last mile children into first mile adults. And today there are 140 million last mile children in India's government schools. And like when you think about it, that's the size of the population of Russia, right? That's how many kids go to school in government school in India today. And the story, when we talk about the story of this last mile child in India's public schools, it's really daunting, and it's very complex because there's so many actors involved. And it's a story that often makes donors want to push for short-term quick wins, which are, rarely sustainable. It's a story that makes governments very defensive. And it's a story that sometimes makes our own team feel a little defeated. Like, will this be something that we'll ever solve in our own lifetime? And through a rebranding exercise, we really want to be able to flip that narrative and really say that this needs to be the story of that last mile leader who is sparking like a quiet last mile education revolution for that last mile child. In some of the remotest regions that we work in, there are leaders who are doing such incredible work and whom we've supported, where when you think about it, I really wish their stories were more prominent, right? When I think about this principal in Goa, who's on the border of Karnataka and Goa, in this hilly region where there's this neglected Adivasi community, when he went there, there were no roofs on any of the classrooms and the children used to get drenched through the monsoons. He got roofs built. The kids had nowhere to play sports, so he spoke to the forest department and got them space to play. He made sure like local indigenous knowledge came into the schooling system through the social science curriculum. This revolution is also being led by like last mile block education officers, like the one in Tripura, where she not only visits schools to help them with teaching and learning, but she also keeps account of the number of girls attending because the risk of early child marriage is so high. It's also the story of that last mile leader who serves in Arunachal on the India-China border in a district where he brings all the kids from the neighboring schools to his high school to solve for real world problems once a month. Like the last time they were solving for excessive plastic waste in the region. So I tell you all of this to say that there is an important worldview embedded in the way these leaders see their stories and who they serve, right? And each of these last mile leaders really wants to change the trajectory of that last mile child. So for us, when I think about a rebranding exercise, it's really about telling a different and better story. And stories come with an accompanying worldview, right? And that worldview really matters in the kind of work we do. So I don't see this rebranding exercise as being some kind of silver bullet that'll, solve the challenges of that last mile child. But it's a powerful way to shift worldviews, right? I really like this hypothesis by Sapir and Worf that talks about how like the language we use really changes how we see the world. And for us, this is really about shifting the worldview of 3 stakeholders. One is the senior government bureaucrat, the second is the donor, and the third is our own team. The senior bureaucrat is usually somebody who's very competent and driven. And we often hear them say things like, I have this entire staff of people who just want a cushy government job. They are all kamchor. They will never improve this education system. And we really want that narrative to change to say, you know what, I actually have a lot of people who are really capable and they're committed to serving that last mile child, and I have to make them visible and incentivize them. So when I see a high school head mobilizing local industry to bring tech into the school, I want to make sure that story becomes more visible. When I see a high school head visiting primary schools to support them with their teaching and learning, I want to give that person a travel allowance. So how do we shift the story of that senior bureaucrat to becoming one of being an enabler to that last mile leader? The second story we really want to shift is that of the average donor, who usually wants quick wins, and quick wins in education are seen as test scores because those are easy and tangible and quick to measure. We want to shift that narrative to want to say, how can the donor see themselves as a catalyst for longer term change that really supports the last mile leaders work, where they really can support the kind of work we at Adhyayan do, which is in relationship with the government, which means that this is not a linear journey. It's not a preset fixed journey. It's a journey of messy co-creation. So how does a donor see themselves as a catalyst for longer term development? And finally, the third story with rebranding that we want to shift is the story for ourselves and the story we tell, which is that we don't want that story to be so prominent that it makes it seem like we are doing the work of the government. We also don't want it to be so invisible that it seems like we're doing nothing. But we want our story to be one of co-conspirators of that last mile leader, where we help them create spaces for collaboration with their peers and a space for them to showcase their gains and to have a voice within the system. By 2030, we want to impact 1 lakh leaders in 1 lakh schools. And with this rebranding exercise, we want the story of the enabler, the catalyst, and the co-conspirator to emerge to really help that last mile leader shine, right? And we really want to make the story of that last mile child one that is a celebration. That's not daunting, but that's a celebration where everyone plays a role and can take pride in galvanizing this whole effort. So yeah, the rebranding is really about helping us tell a powerful story of that last mile education revolution. So yeah, thank you.
Fantastic, Anushka. Fantastic. Very spirited presentation. Judges, anything? Diksha, you want to ask something?
Yes. So no, I echo Kiran's thoughts on very spirited and very powerful narrative there, Anushri. So kudos on that. Very powerful thought as well. I have a question on your last point where you said that you want to be seen as co-conspirators and co-developers or co-pushers of this, for want of any other this thing. I'm curious to know, how do you think a branding exercise could help in that? Because this is much more deep-seated issue. I mean, I don't think it's got to do with your capability or your intention or your even your vision. It's a lot about us versus them. How do you think that a thing like branding, or are you thinking that branding will be one of the things in many things which you think would help you shift? So I'm curious to hear from you about that.
Thanks, Diksha, for that. Yes, of course, branding being just one thing, because when we work with government, we really try to make sure that, we're fitting their policy mandate so that this doesn't feel like external extra, that we work with them together, that there's an intent to want to work with us when we enter a state, that we're not pushing that. And a lot of our work actually goes ground up, where we work with leaders for them to identify their own needs and then work on the needs that they think are contextually important. So in Tripura, in an aspirational district, that might be attendance because kids are in the field. Whereas in Goa, it might be about how do I make my classroom a more active place and how do I take children outdoors. So there's a lot of pieces to being a co-creator. But I feel like